Hi, I'm Tim of the 1916 Company, announcing our all-new 1916 Company app. Check out our all-new community features, including wrist time, where you can log the watch you wear, how often you wear your watches, and see a graphical representation of how you use your collection. But wait, there's more, because this wrist time feature allows you to post in real time to our live feed of user wrist shots. Our community functions also include professionally moderated discussions, all sorts of views, debate, insights into what people want to say about the watches of our times, and all your favorite features are coming back, including media, editorial from Jack Forster, video from yours truly. You can continue to build your online collection and your wish list, plus all the commercial features are back. Buy, trade, and sell through the app, browse our global inventory of pre-owned and new watches. A wrist shot could begin the process of a trade or a purchase. Find the 1916 Company app on the Apple App Store and Google. Hi, I'm Tim of the 1916 Company here with our own Jack Forster. Today we are talking about watches that are named after luminaries of sports, entertainment, and various obscurities too. So Jack, what is an eponymous watch? And give me an example.
Well, an eponymous watch is a watch that is actually made in collaboration with and named after or named with somebody who is a celebrity in the field of sports or a famous musician or somebody who's prominent enough that they and the watch can kind of bathe in each other's reflected glory.
In other words, you sort of become an ambassador, but also part of the sales campaign. So a great example would be a Richard Mille that is co-branded with Rafael Nadal, or perhaps something like the Rolex Deep Sea James Cameron. These are watches that, in general, are tied to a personality perceived to bring value to the brand. Where this goes a little bit off the rails is when we start talking about people and accomplishments so obscure that you genuinely scratch your head. And I think that's the focus of today's discussion.
Yeah, and the whole question of how brands decide who they work with is an interesting one because sometimes it seems really obvious. James Cameron, for example, world-renowned film director, authentically a deep sea explorer. So, he's kind of an easy one, right? But then sometimes brands pick someone who is, famous, but they don't necessarily seem to have an organic connection to the brand. So when Tudor started working with Lady Gaga, it turned out to be a successful partnership, but it raised a lot of eyebrows. And then there are watches that are made in partnership with people who you've never heard of, who the larger world, it seems, has never heard of. And the brand itself can be, very big or very small, but you sort of wonder what the upside is to work with someone who, as far as you can tell, is completely unknown.
So let's talk about an example of that, and I know you've got one that comes to mind, a little bit of a head scratcher from Audemars Piguet.
The Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Sébastien Buemi. So this particular partnership was one that mystified me because I had never heard of the gentleman. I knew, the only thing that I knew about him at the outset when I started looking into why they had done the partnership was that he was Swiss, a Swiss competitive driver and a figure in motorsports. And the assumption that I made was that they had just decided to partner with him out of a sense of national pride. So it's kind of like working with Alinghi. Now, Alinghi is a legitimate force in the world of sailing, but it's also a competitive regatta team from one of the most landlocked countries in Europe.
Controversially,
yes. And there's and I've always felt that there was a certain amount of national pride going into this thing. So I didn't understand the relationship at all, and then I started looking into what this guy has actually done professionally. It turns out that he has been, he's had a very, very successful career. He was in Formula One from 2009 to 2011, won the 2015-2016 Formula E championships with Renault, and he has won a joint record 4 World Endurance Championship titles and is a 4-time winner of Le Mans.
Yeah, the funny thing is most of these F1 drivers who get their own special edition watch, let's say the Juan Pablo Montoya from Audemars Piguet, or the Rubens Barrichello, or the Jarno Trulli. These people have extensive Formula One records. The funny thing about Seb Buemi is he was a local boy to Audemars Piguet growing up. Right. He is Swiss. It is a matter of national pride. But he largely made his name outside of Formula One, unlike these others. He was a decorated Formula E driver during the nascent years of that championship, and most impressively, WEC champion, so World Endurance Championship, of which Le Mans is the most prominent race. A winner there with Toyota in the predecessor to hypercar, and then later on also a competitive driver in hypercar. This guy made his name and his reputation almost entirely outside of Formula One.
Yeah, which is remarkable. He's, and it just goes to show you that just because you haven't heard of somebody doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad choice for a brand ambassador.
No, but I can definitely tell you that some of the guys I'm about to bring up you will not have heard of.
All right. What do you got?
You may have heard of this just because the feat behind the watch was so bizarre. But back in 2005, a man named Emmanuel Coindre rowed a boat, a small boat, like a kayak, across the Pacific Ocean. It was 9,000 kilometers, which is like 5,600 miles, I think. And this guy took 129 days to do it. And as a reward...
Was he rowing?
Oh, yes. Rowing a little boat. It capsized 16 times, apparently. And as a result, 30 Jaeger-LeCoultre Master Compressor Extreme World chronographs were made. 20 of these were titanium and steel. 10 of them were platinum and steel. I hope to God he got the platinum one.
What's the gentleman's name again?
Emmanuel Coindre. So he's famous.
Is he Swiss?
I'm not sure what his nationality is, other than the fact that he is just an incredibly focused and patient person. And
with big arms.
With big arms and probably skinny legs. And so he's rowed boats across, I believe, both oceans, Atlantic and Pacific at this point. And if you get that JLC watch, it's really nice black with yellow trim, and it's got this little map of his trans-Pacific journey from the US to Japan. And I cannot imagine, it's like when I was a little kid, I heard that Emily Dickinson killed herself by putting her head in an oven. And I didn't understand at the time that meant she gassed herself. I thought she put her head in a functional hot oven and scalded herself to death. And I thought this was just an untenable act of self-discipline. Well, that's what a kid thinks. This guy actually had that level of discipline.
Is there something that goes on where somebody is starting to rise in prominence and the brand wants to get them before they become too expensive, and they're kind of betting that they're going to become famous?
Where do you go from there? I mean, that's like if you're rowing across oceans, the Pacific and the Atlantic, that's your career peak.
Yeah, and that sort of person is a known quantity at that point, right? Like you know how big he's going to be.
And it's almost one of those people who, rides a bicycle around the world. It's such an obscure sport. You expect it would be on ESPN, the Ocho, alongside dodgeball. But that one act was the beginning, middle, and end of his ambassador status with Jaeger-LeCoultre.
Yeah. I wonder. There's only so many oceans you can row across, I guess.
But you had two different ambassadors at the same time with basically the same watch.
Right.
Valentino Rossi, the greatest Moto Grand Prix rider of all time. Emmanuel Coindre, a man with enormous calluses on his hand. Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta think that someone knew someone, or there was a friendship or something went on in the background there. But that is the ultimate obscure sports tribute watch.
Certainly a feat worthy of recognition, and certainly liable to get a lot less press than being a championship Formula One driver.
And I'm willing to bet you could pick that watch up for a whole lot less than a Nadal.
I ran across another individual who worked with a really major brand, in this case Omega, and I'd never heard of him before in my life. And when I found out what he had done to become a partner, it was still sort of a mystery to me. And this gentleman is Armand Mondo Duplantis.
Oh, and I know this because I did a segment on Watches Tonight about that watch.
Oh, did you really?
I did.
Okay.
But I'm not going to steal your thunder.
No. It's just, so Armand Mondo Duplantis, a fairly young man, also known as Mondo Duplantis. Some people just call him Mondo. He did a Aquaterra in collaboration with Omega, which is just the Omega Seamaster Aquaterra Armando Mondo Duplantis. And his whole thing is that he's a pole vaulter. And I thought to myself, why in the world, with a brand that has successive James Bonds as their ambassador, do a partnership with a pole vaulter? And I thought no more about it. And then I started wondering about him again while thinking about you and I having this conversation. And I found out he's not only a pole vaulter. He has been described as the greatest pole vaulter of all time. He's the current world record holder at 20 feet 7 inches, and he's the winner of 7 senior global titles, 2-time Olympic winner. So if you're going to pick a pole vaulter to do a watch with in your Omega, he's the pole vaulter to pick.
He's the Valentino Rossi of pole vaulters.
He is.
But now the funny thing is, the watch, which is based on the Aquaterra Ultralight, it's yellow and blue, so Swedish colors. Makes sense. That's how he competes. But the funny thing is, he's an American from Louisiana. He's competing as a Swede, but he's actually an American from Louisiana.
So I have a couple of questions. Oh, well, one observation and one question. The observation is that, of course, the Ultralight is the one that they would pick for him.
Anything else would weigh him down.
Yeah, that actually makes perfect sense. The other thing is, how does somebody from Louisiana end up pole vaulting as a world champion for
Sweden?
For Sweden.
Yeah, I think family connections, that's where his family's roots are, and I think at the end of the day, he had, oftentimes you see this with athletes who have dual nationality, a better chance at maybe getting into the Olympic movement through one passport rather than another. And I also think that just he found a better fit with the Swedish teams.
Yeah.
So, it's a very unusual thing to have, one birth country and another competitive country at the Olympic level. But I see it all the time in pro cycling. And I think Andrei Chmil had a million different nationalities when he rode. So it's not that uncommon in the world of Olympic sports to be competing for a country other than the nation of your birth.
Yeah.
But it does seem a little bit weird when you think you've got this Swiss watch about a Swedish pole vaulter, but the guy's actually from the US South. Okay, so in terms of obscure ambassadors and eponymous watches no one understands, we reached the late Felix Baumgartner, an Austrian daredevil who actually just recently passed away in some sort of paragliding disaster. But back in 2012, he jumped out of a balloon at a height of 39 kilometers and, wearing a spacesuit, attained Mach 1.25. So a whole bunch of records were set there, but the end of the story is a 10-piece black DLC Platinum Zenith watch. It was the Academy Christoph Coulomb Felix Baumgartner. Now, this is one of those cases where the watch is a head-scratcher and the guy is more than a little bit controversial, because prior to his untimely passing, he voiced a positive opinion of dictatorship and got involved in a traffic slapping accident with another motorist.
Oh, dear.
So between the slap fest and the controversial politics, he managed to get his name on 10 watches that were made of platinum but covered with black DLC, and simultaneously featured a picture of him in his spacesuit on the dial. And it's actually a beautiful watch with a weird subject matter.
But black DLC over, I can't figure that out. Black DLC over platinum?
I know, so you can't see that it's platinum.
Right.
Now,
yeah.
the only other company I can think of that does this routinely is Urwerk, and then only on very special pieces. And I think purely because a different Felix Baumgartner and his partner Fry, who designs these things, have a very droll sense of humor about the irony of a fully blackened platinum watch.
Yeah.
So you've got this black platinum watch with a micro-sculpted white gold Felix Baumgartner on the power reserve. He's looking down on a turquoise disc that represents the Earth, into which a gimbaled El Primero escapement has been set. And then you have this aventurine starscape behind. So aside from the controversial guy and the weird subject matter and the oddball DLC Platinum, it is actually a very beautiful watch. It's got that unique zero-G style gimbaled escapement. It's not a tourbillon, it is an escapement that always faces up. Think vintage marine chronometer, and you've got the basic idea.
You're fascinated by that complication from Zenith. This is far from the first time that you've mentioned it.
No, I'm a big fan of it. The Christoph Coulomb is a very cool series, and if you play your cards right, you might even find one with a fusee and chain. But this particular watch, because it is so weird, has Hall of Fame prominence in my cognition of all these old weird ambassadors.
Yeah.
I don't understand the thought process behind it, but it is so weird, it's wonderful, and I would love to own one.
Didn't that complication show up for the first time in a Defy back in the Thierry Nataf days?
It did. I don't know if it was ever made, but it showed up as the Defy Zero G. I saw the rendering of it. There's no doubt that Nadaf paid for the development of this. So for all of his flaws, he did put a ton of money into the stuff that would then come out in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14. And this is a big one.
I'm always glad when watch brands give models names rather than just numbers, because if there's one huge Achilles heel I have is that I have a very hard time memorizing reference numbers. So there are head-scratching partnerships with individuals, which can be head-scratching for any number of reasons, depending on the individual. And and in some cases, what started out as a good idea in terms of a partnership turns out to be a terrible one. You sponsor a rising athlete, and then they have, a couple of
steroid
temper
scandals
tantrums in public.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Suddenly, it's not such a hot idea anymore. But one of the strange relationships between a brand and another brand that I've come across is the Big Bang Unico Nespresso, which was I bet that is the first time in the entire history of both of those brands that anybody has ever thought of those two brands together. I'm not sure who came up with this. It's a very, very strange notion. I mean, it's a strange notion for obvious reasons. And so the Big Bang Unico Nespresso had a case made out of discarded aluminum Nespresso pods and coffee grounds.
Yeah, and the funny thing about this is that it is a green ceramic Big Bang Unico, and I believe this came out in 2023, and you've got elements in the case itself, because with an Hublot, you've got the inner case that gives you the water resistance and houses the movement and all the sensitive parts. And then you've got the cladding on the outside, which is, in this case, the ceramic and the resin inserts. So you've got those metallic elements added into the structure of the watch. And then you've also got the coffee grounds that were blended into the composite for the strap. And so the idea was that we would take...
Oh, is that... I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that's where the grounds ended
Yeah,
up
that's
in the
where
strap? Oh.
I was,
Right.
yeah, because if they found a way to make ceramic out of coffee grounds, they should start working on room temperature superconductors, because they're alchemists. But no, it was in the strap. And so the idea was you put the grounds in the strap. And this doesn't seem necessary, because I would think that's the one biodegradable part of an espresso cup.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it is a cool idea, only in as much as it is the best conversation piece for your non-watch enthusiast friend. Tell them about minute repeaters, they'll be like, whatever. Tell them you got a watch made of various parts of coffee cups, and they'll be riveted.
But like the Venn diagram of Nespresso customers and Hublot customers, I mean, they don't overlap.
I
Or do
disagree.
they?
I think both of them are stereotypically over-caffeinated. I got their number.
That's probably the connection.
Cool watch, though. I gotta say, if you're into green watches, this one pretty much pegs the meter. In the era of the green watch, this was the greenest.
Sure was.
All right, so the original, we talked about Felix Baumgartner being a little bit of a controversial ambassador, but the original uninsurable brand ambassador, Charles Lindbergh, back in 1931, still riding high on his fame from the 1927 solo flight across the Atlantic, he collaborated with Longines to create a navigation watch for pilots that bears his name. Now, to be perfectly fair, it actually was an extension of research done by a U.S. Navy officer, Philip Van Horn Weems. So this was a Weems-type watch, but it was known as the Lindbergh Hour Angle. And it was an important piece of navigation gear in a cockpit back in the day when you absolutely did not have electronic guidance, and the closest you would get was a radio signal that would allow you to synchronize your watch to the second. So this watch, known as the Hour Angle, was designed specifically to assist with various types of celestial navigation. So it had a couple of different functions. It had a mobile center dial that would allow you to synchronize to the second against a radio signal that was true to the second, because no watch was that accurate for the course of a long flight, not at that time.
Right.
It also had the ability to calculate the hour angle, and the hour angle is a arc between the meridian plane, which is basically GMT, and a local point, and it can be expressed because it's a sort of a dihedral arc around the globe. It can be expressed in terms of hours, rotations, or degrees, minutes, and seconds. And so in order to get longitude, you need to be able to measure the hour angle and have a timepiece that can accurately retain the time at the prime meridian. You can find local time, but you have to have the time in Greenwich and a watch that can maintain that. So between being able to synchronize to the radio signal so you have the correct time and being able to calculate the hour angle, you have the ability to navigate using this Weems science-based Lindbergh watch.
Yeah, the Weems system of navigation was essentially the first really systematic system of celestial navigation designed for air navigation. And Philip Van Horn Weems is an interesting character. A little bit of a side note.
No, good.
He was raised on a farm in the Midwest, and he and his brothers and sisters were orphaned when he was 15 years old, and they just ran the farm. The children just ran the farm until it was time for him to go away to college, where he excelled in boxing, I believe, and then developed this system of aerial navigation. And he kept updating the system right up until World War II. I have one of his books from, I think, 1936, and in the first paragraph, I think he writes, "It is surprisingly easy to get lost."
Sage advice. But actually, Lindbergh wound up getting lost near Cuba at one point, and so in 1928, 1 year after his flight across the Atlantic, he actually studied with Weems, and using the knowledge built up from those study sessions, he would go on to other exploits. He flew for a long time before his somewhat uninsurable side course into politics. But in 1931, with Longines, he launched that Lindbergh watch. And again, it had the ability to calculate hour angle, synchronize to the second against a reference radio time, and correct for the equation of time, because the sun was also going to be used. And so you get this very comprehensive navigation watch that would later be reissued by Longines in the 1980s in an exceedingly small format that was much smaller than the original. I think it was a 33 millimeter watch.
Last I checked, the Longines Lindbergh watch is still in their catalog, but I haven't looked for, I think, a year.
No, I believe it was reissued again around 2006, and for the anniversary of, in anticipation of 2007, the anniversary of his flight, and then again in 2017 on the anniversary of his flight. It's become a much bigger watch since the 80s reedition, but the Lindbergh hour angle watch was probably the first wristwatch, as far as I know, that was named after a specific famous figure on both a professional and a marketing basis.
Oh, that would be an interesting thing to look into, because I can't think of an earlier watch named after a celebrity either. It'd be interesting to see if he actually is the first.
Unless, and this is one possible alternative, and maybe the only one, depending on when it was possible to order a Cartier Santos from Cartier.
1911.
You could get it in 1911, because it was invented in 1904.
What I haven't been, it's funny you should mention this, because I've just started trying to come up with some actual verifiable information. So designed in 1904, one prototype given to Alberto Santos Dumont is the story that you read in Franco Cologni's book on the tank watch, and it's also, with much more detail, it's also the story you get in Francesca Cartier-Briquel's book about her family, which is called The Cartiers. But I have so far not been able to find any actual verifiable primary source evidence that the Santos was called that it was called the Santos Dumont when it was actually delivered.
Yeah, that's why I'm not sure, because it predates the Lindbergh by a whole boatload of decades. The problem is verifying that it was called the Santos in its time.
Yeah, Franco Cologni in the book, he says this has been preserved as an oral tradition in the maison.
And there are
which is
a
not
lot
reassuring if you're a historian.
Oral traditions. We call them urban legends these days. So I would say Lindbergh, Lucky Lindy holds the record for now, pending further scholarship. But between Felix Baumgartner, Charles Lindbergh, and Emmanuel Coindre, I wanted to have the alternative to like the Nadals and the Montoyas, the ambassadors you've never heard of or never thought of.
And one sort of afterthought after having looked at this a little bit more closely is the world that partnerships are chosen from. It's generally fairly narrow. It's music stars, sports figures, well-known musicians, sometimes visual artists. But I can't think of a single instance of a brand partnering with somebody who, say, won the Nobel Prize in physics, or a championship chess player. The sort of more cerebral occupations, the more cerebral competitions, STEM. And if anybody would remember this, you would. But has there ever been a partnership with a watch partnership with a Nobel Prize winner?
Well, I remember there was a period when Jaeger-LeCoultre had a bunch of ambassadors who were distinguished people who had contributed to the arts and science. I think Craig Venter was one of them, but he didn't have a watch named after him. That's the thing. But in terms of actually having a Nobel laureate name on the watch, as far as I can recall, no. I
Yeah.
think it would be a great idea, but for the same reason that Craig Venter still isn't advertising Jaeger-LeCoultre, it might be a little bit too cerebral.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the end of the day, if I look back in history, the first watch that I can think of that has been inextricably linked to a person's name for centuries now, Breguet's Marie Antoinette.
Oh, yes, yes.
The original wristwatch, I guess pocket watch ambassador in that case.
Yeah, yeah.
Not for good either.
No, much more famous posthumously.
Yeah, I would say that's probably an honor you could skip.
Yeah.
But in any way, guys, if you can think of like Nobel laureates, people who won a prize in science or peace or literature, whose name appears on a watch or in the advertising for watch, please let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, and let's see some brand do something like do a watch collaboration with a Booker Prize winner or a Pulitzer Prize winner or something. It'd break things up a little bit.
Is there a Bob Dylan watch?
Maybe.
He won the Nobel Prize in literature, didn't he?
Well,
Well, we got to find out. Again, you guys, you let us
All
know.
right.
School us. Anyway, I'm Tim, he's Jack, and thanks for logging on.